Well, hello again, and here's a brand that we haven't seen before on this channel. This is a Regentone. I'm pretty certain it's called a Regentone, although when I first saw one I wasn't sure whether it was pronounced that, or Regent 1, or Regentone, or Regentone. But I'll tell you why. When I looked into the history of this, the company started off in the late 1920s as the Regent Radio Supply Company. But they didn't supply radios, they supplied bits of radios. And their great business idea was to provide battery eliminators. So old valve radios, and we're talking really old valve radios here, just after the birth of broadcasting in this country, used to have lead acid accumulators that you used to have to keep taking back to the shop to be refilled or recharged or whatever. And no doubt took the skin off your leg while you were cycling back there with it. So they came up with a box that you could plug into the mains and would replace your battery. And by all accounts, it was a roaring success. So later on, they expanded into thinking, well, if we make bits of radios, why not make whole radios? So that's what they did. And then along came the Second World War, and along with a lot of other companies, it was a bit difficult for them. In the end, they were taken over by STC, who also had other things in their stable, which we have seen before, like RGD, ITT and KB. Sounds like a recitation of the New Year's Honours List, doesn't it? Anyway, KB Colster Branders was another of the brands that they took over and then sort of merged with ITT. But as with other companies, when we looked, I think, at a Pi or a Philips the other week, they kept a lot of these brands around because I think they felt that there was some loyalty to them, so why not use them? In fact, this particular one, which is the Regentone TR019, was almost identical to the KB radio, the KR019. The main difference was that whereas this is brown with a blue pointer, the KB version was blue with a red pointer. What a difference that must have made to your enjoyment of Uncle Charlie Chester's show on the Light programme. Anyway, we have the Regentone version, the brown one, and apart from being finished in this brown leatherette stuff, it's got these controls which have got this strange colour inlaid in it. I would almost equate it to the colour of a rather sickly chocolate bar I remember from my youth called a Caramac. And that sort of made me think, oh, maybe I'd like to try one of those again. But they don't make them anymore. And they certainly don't make these anymore. As I said, I think this is from the 1960s. And the reason for that is the markings on the scale, so it hasn't got the radios 1 and 2 and things. It's got home, third and light on it. It obviously survived the numbered networks appearance and also the changeover of wavelengths in 1978, because it's got these hideous little stickers that the BBC gave out in 1978. They moved all the wavelengths around. You could put these on your radio to show where everything had moved to. As I think we've seen in other videos on this channel, these are not the easiest thing to get off without causing damage to the perspex. So that's another thing sent to triers. Now, although this was a British branded radio, it wasn't made in Britain. As a result, it's got a one of those warning stickers we used to have back in the day. It says, "Warning, Johnny Foreigner has made this radio, so expect treachery." And then I found something else when I looked at it on the bottom of it. It's got this thing on the bottom that says American Ryukyu. I don't know, I thought maybe that was the sort of material they'd used to trim it. But actually Ryukyu, and I may well be, in fact I'm almost certainly pronouncing that wrongly, so apologies for that if you know how it's pronounced. There's a little group of islands off of Japan that was occupied for some time after the war by the US forces. And that's where this would have been made. So it's a Japanese made radio effectively. And it's an odd mix of construction stuff, I think. I mean, if you look at it, you can see that if I take the back off here, which comes off with these little clips, you can see that it's really just made of cardboard on the outside, and it seems to have swelled up and expanded, so it's not straight anymore, which is a bit annoying. It's got, as I said, a sort of leatherette type covering, which doesn't look too bad. But although you'd think, oh, cardboard, that's a bit rubbish, isn't it? It is actually quite heavy, even without the batteries in it. I tell you how I found this out, because it's also a bit unstable, so if you even tilt it just a little bit forward, it falls straight over like that, and it's pretty sharp edges here, so when it does that and catches your fingers, I can tell you it's not pleasant. Let me just show you something. 1.5 kilograms without the batteries, that's quite a lot. So, bits of cardboard, but obviously they've used some pretty serious... See, there it goes again, falls over very quickly. Fortunately, my hand wasn't in the way that time. So they used some serious weight of metal in it, despite only using cardboard for the outside. I don't know if they got the metal from abandoned Japanese warships or whatever, but for a small thing, it does weigh quite a lot. The construction inside is very typically Japanese, I think, of that era. It's very tightly packed. There's an odd 5mm coil here in the middle of all the 10mm coils. I mean, I'm used to seeing a lot of 5mm coils in Japanese radios, but why that one is 5mm and all the others are 10mm, I don't know. Bit of modularity, separate audio amplifier here, but all of the RF stuff on this board, usual ferrite, and battery compartment here that seems to take 4, it tells you here actually, 4 U11, which is basically C cells that go in here. That looks a bit bent, so I'm not sure how well that will fit. It doesn't look to me like there should have been a tube of some sort, because there is padding here, and also there's this ribbon to pull them out again, so it looks as if that should have been a bit tighter, but again, perhaps, you know, something with the swelling of the case or whatever has affected that. Anyway, let's put some power on it and see if it works. Alright, I've powered it off the bench supply, which makes a bit of a racket, as you can possibly hear, but I was having difficulty getting the batteries to stay in the battery compartment, so I think my diagnosis that it has got a bit bent was correct, and I don't really want to address that at the moment. But anyway, I've got 6 volts powering it up, so if I turn it on, we're on FM at the moment, it feels very faint. Now, one of the problems is this telescopic aerial is in there, but there's no top on it, and it's all coiled up correctly. It looks like all the segments are there, but I can't get the thing out, so that's not helpful for a start. So let's try and what I'll try and do is put some additional put an external aerial on there and see if that helps matters. I better get rid of that. Well, because of the hideous stickers, I can't quite see what frequency I'm on, but it looks as if we may be on the soon-to-be defunct Star Radio. In fact, it won't be Star Radio anymore by the time this video comes out, I can pretty much guarantee. So let's get back a bit.
I can't even get it right.
No, that's interesting. I think actually what I was on there was Radio Cambridgeshire.
That to come, we're going to be talking about essentials that you've forgotten when you've seriously lost your head over something.
And that's showing around 100 megahertz. That's quite a bit out. Should be down here on 96. I'll need an ident to know what that is, but it's all very faint. I mean, I've got the volume practically all the way up there on FM, so that's quite a bit out. Let's have a look, see if we can find anything on long wave.
Oh, they're not going to bloody fire there. Not now.
He's a liar, right?
You are on it today, aren't you?
So,
Bit more volume there, and it is in not far off the right place. Let's try medium wave.
I think the fact that
Actually, about where that 2 is should be, because that would have been Radio 2 back in the day. It is now 5 Live, so...
you know, I think to your point,
and Radio 1.
before Charlie Baker be allowed to change rugby league clubs, he decided to get the Ben Wigan last week.
Is now Talk Sport. So it looks like the AM side is not too bad, but the FM side is way out of alignment and very faint. So we've got something to work with there, I think. I think the next thing to do is get it apart and also see if we can do something about that withdrawn aerial. Right, I'm not completely clear on how to get it apart. I think there's a couple of screws down here I can see. Maybe there's one in that top corner. Service manual is extensive in several ways, but not in telling you how to dismantle it. So I think take those screws out first. Now to say, it's been an absolute nightmare to dismantle. Every screw has not just been screwed in, it's been glued in. Every nut has not just been tightened, it's been glued as well. And it just reminds me of sort of old guys that I remember working with back in the day that used to put Loctite on everything. That'll never come out again, lad. Yeah, but what if you want it to come out? To be fair, these things are all a bit loose, as I think we saw. I'm not sure I mentioned that, but they were all a bit slack, and they have been glued, so obviously the glue didn't make any difference anyway. They still came undone. So I've tightened those up and managed to get the aerial out by pushing from the bottom, and now I've got to the stage where this bit at the top, the outer bit, is sort of bent a bit. So I think somebody tried to get it out before, but I've now managed to get the core of it out, and pushing through from the bottom of there you can get, I think, successive cores out if you can get enough in there. But I can get more and more of it out as I go on. I suppose what I need is a bit of solid copper wire, really, that might just do it. Let's have a go at that. Right, let's give this a go. So if I shove that, it's straightening up a bit, doesn't it? It'll probably be okay. I'll shove that in there. How far can I go at pushing out the last few bits? So I've got quite a long way with that. I think the last bit might be a challenge. No, there's one bit extra. Now you see, I think I'm okay here now, because although I think there's another bit to go in there, I can put a screw in the end of that, and that will stop it falling back in again. So we're probably okay, and I can get that aerial back into a reasonable shape, which is good news, because you're not going to be able to get another one, are you? Now while I got this off, I also thought I'll have a look at this tarnished tuning scale here, and I put a little bit of metal polish on it in the corner here, and that does seem to take the tarnishing away if I rub it up. But I was a bit afraid of what if I went any further it was going to do to it. Was it going to just pull off all the scale markings? But I tried a bit on this little MC bit down here, and it doesn't seem to have done too badly on that. It hasn't removed the MC, even though I've given it a real polish on the end of it. So I'm thinking I'll take that off and give that a work over as well, and that'll make that look a bit better. Some of it is faded. I don't think I can do much about that, but it should be able to. We should be able to get it looking a bit better than it is, I think. As usual, this is not going to plan, so I started off thinking, yeah, I can improve this by polishing it up, and it did to some extent work on these bits, but you can go too far, and then you can see I have gone a bit too far, and it starts to strip away some of it, which is quite annoying, because you can see that bit looks a bit better, but this bit now looks worse. If I go any further, it will, I think, start to pull the writing off, which is quite annoying. So, you know, trying to make it better, I think I've actually made it worse. It's very difficult to judge when you're getting to the point where you're making it better, where you stop making it better and start making it worse. Although I know I've gone past it here and not quite here. I think I'm going to leave it alone now and write that one off to experience, which, as they say, is a terrible teacher, but fools will learn from no other. Meanwhile, these BBC wavelength stickers, you can put isopropyl on, and that will pretty much remove the logos themselves, but getting the stickers, the remnants, the base of the stickers off, really I've found nothing other than more isopropyl and fingernails works for that. Anything sharper, you'll scratch the perspex. It does start to dissolve the glue, but it really is a very laborious process, but I've started it now, so we might as well finish it and get something right, having made such a horlicks of the tuning scale. Right, leaving aside my vandalism of the tuning scale, I've decided now to turn my attention to the telescopic aerial. Now the problem with this was that it had no top on it, and although all the sections were present, it was retreating into itself, and then it was impossible to pull it out again. So I managed to pull it out, and then I thought, what we need to do is put something along the top which will stop it going in. Now ideally there would originally have been a thing at the top, a little button at the top, which would have stopped it doing this. Normally when that fails, I usually put a self-tapping screw of some sort in the end of it, but this is very small, and a self-tapping screw wouldn't really, even if you could find one small enough to go in there, it wouldn't be big enough to stop it retracting. So I thought, well, what I'll do is take out this little top bit of the aerial, because when we get to the next smallest bit, there's a chance that I can put something in the end there, and it will stay there and be big enough to act as a stop. Now, taking apart a telescopic aerial is not something I've really gone through on this channel before. It's a bit of a messy business. At every stage, you've got a couple of these little copper things. And you can see there's a hole here in this one, and I don't know if this is the right one for this particular one, but these copper things go either side of that. And you can see that they have a little pip that goes into that hole. So there's one each side of it. And that is what holds it in and stops it at the right stage when you pull it out. So I've taken all those apart, and it means you have to do it, you have to disassemble it from the bottom. To get the top bit out, you have to take out all the lower pieces. So I've done that, and so what I'm going to do now is put it all back together and see if I can then just put a self-tapping screw in the top of this one. And although we've got a slightly shorter aerial by a couple of inches or so, we might have a more usable one. Okay, a bit more progress. I clamped a ferrule to the top of the telescopic aerial, which helped with the top end and stopped it sinking into itself there. But I've not got a solution for this bottom end here, which is now the big problem, in that because somebody has cut this, it won't grip that properly now anymore. I suppose I'll have to try and cut it back a bit further, but then it's going a bit too far, I think, and it's difficult to get a good cut on that. I think I might in the end just have to try and find another telescopic aerial for it, because although I believed I was improving things, and I have improved things, I don't know that it's really worth any more effort. Although getting the right sort of telescopic aerial with this sort of screw fitment on the end is difficult without getting it from a scrapped set, and I don't think I've got any of those left, or none of the aerials left anyway, from ones that have not been able to be repaired. Going back to the set itself, you'll notice I've put this little adapter here to get the 6 volts from 4 AA's instead of from the 4 C cells. Now I've had a look at this and I've tried and failed many times. I've straightened it out so it is now the correct size, slightly bent there, but that is now as pretty much as square as I can get it, and I cannot fit 4 C cells in without them just popping out, and I can't make it any longer. Either there was a tube of some sort on the inside here which they all went into that held them together, or maybe it's just the fact that, and we've seen this with other batteries before, batteries are a little bit smaller back in the day when they were sort of cardboard cases rather than metal ones, and they just don't fit anymore. In any case, 4 AA's will do the job just as well, so I've added that in there, put some Velcro on the end of it, and I've put a corresponding bit of Velcro on the bottom of the case. So that's the power supply and sorted out. You may notice I've got it turned over so that you can't see the mess I made of the scale. Well, we've already shown you the mess I made of the tuning scale. However, I did find that that tuning scale is not very difficult to replicate on a computer, so that's what I've done. Printed it out on a bit of glossy paper and attached it to here, and that has covered up the mess that we made earlier. When I say we, it was me, obviously. But nobody shouted out any warnings when I was eliminating the BBC's national networks. The other couple of things we wanted to look at here was the FM being a bit weak and feeble, and also being completely out of alignment. Now, in terms of weak FM, although the sensitivity on the RF side on FM isn't brilliant, I think a lot of the problem is the rather poor design of the tone control. If I put something on,
I think you're right there, Ferg. I think you've got to focus on your
so I've got to go a long way up here to get any volume.
Works, which is what you've been doing for this whole season, but also having the crowd there.
But that's the tone control.
Seeing signs with your names on them, seeing light blue in the crowd. Really
signs with your names on?
Yeah.
And with the tone control full up to the treble end, it's fine. But then
Having that support from the crowd, I think.
Turn the tone control down at all, and it knocks quite a lot off the volume. Now that actually happens also if you're on AM.
They were carried out, asylum seekers, and that really, really boosted the debate and made it quite an angry, febrile debate. So
the same thing happens on AM there. I think it's just that there's more energy in the mid-range on AM and very little at the top end. The AM will be topping out at about 5 kilohertz, whereas the FM should be going up at least to about 10. And a lot of it gets removed by that tone control. And if we look at the design of that circuit, I don't know why they've done it like this, but it seems that it's almost designed to be like an auxiliary volume control, which is what tone controls are really, but just frequency dependent. But I don't think they've done this properly, and it's having a really bad effect on the sound. The other thing is they've used an electrolytic capacitor for the tone control, and it's only 0.2 microfarads. I don't know why they've used an electrolytic for that. Is there possibly something wrong with the electrolytic? I think probably not. I'm going to replace it with a ceramic one anyway, because I don't think you need an electrolytic in that position. So we'll try that and see if it makes any difference. I have a feeling it won't. It's just a bad design. Okay, I've taken that capacitor out. So let's have a look and see how it reads. So it says a bit high in capacitance value, 0.36 rather than 0.2, I think it should have been. And yeah, it does look as if that capacitor's a bit rough, really. Let's put a different one in and see how we go.
It was number 1 this very week. So that was at number 1 this very week, and the top film was Toy Story 2, made by Pixar for Disney.
Well, it's not the most glorious episode of Neil's Old Radio, is it? I've managed to not quite fix an aerial, trash the tuning scale, and ripped into the design of the tone control, claimed that there was nothing wrong with the capacitor, and obviously there was, and as you can hear, it's a lot better now. I did change the coupling capacitor as well, but that didn't make as much difference, but I thought I might as well do it as the two next to one another. Whether we go for a wholesale capacitor change, I'm sort of tempted, apart from the fact that this board, as I mentioned earlier, is very tightly packed, very difficult to work on, very thin tracks, easy to lift them and make a mess of. Actually, I didn't even cut the end off that capacitor, did I? So that's a bit of a... God, we're doing well today. Is the battery off? Yeah. I think I should possibly have a rest from doing this. Anyway, alignment, yes. You might have noticed that Radio Cambridgeshire.
BBC Sounds app. On your smart speaker.
Play BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
And on your radio.
The sound of Cambridgeshire is
BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
At 1 o'clock with the latest BBC News for Cambridgeshire, I'm Paul Hayes. World leaders have been taking part in a summit in Ukraine to promise their support on the 3rd anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. Anna Starushkevich is from Ukraine and now lives in Cambridge. She's watching the talks closely.
Yay, we managed to find a Ukrainian living in Cambridge so we can claim this as local news. You'll notice that Radio Cambridgeshire is now on 96, which is where it should be, so the alignment is now correct. I will mention a bit about it. Let's just flip this over a little. The good thing was all of these transformers were actually quite free and easy to turn, so it wasn't like you often get with older sets where I'm really scared to sort of start fiddling with any of them if it's anywhere near okay, because what happens is the ferrite core dissolves and you've had it, you'll not get another one like it. But these were all okay, and I went through the IF alignment, which is basically just injecting 10.7 megahertz, which is the FM IF frequency, and adjusting the ones it tells you to do for peak level, really. There's also a thing that minimises the AM, but I didn't touch that. Now, the fiddly thing with these sort of sets is that you can see there's a couple of inductors here which are really just like little coils. There's one down here which is the... let's see if we can get a bit closer. So there's one here which is at the aerial side, and you'll notice I had to spread it out quite a bit, and there's one here which is the oscillator side. Now, what they tell you to do is shove 87 megahertz into it with the control, with the tuning control all the way over, and where they say it should be is right on the L of light, so you should adjust the pointer to make sure when this is at its minimum frequency, then the pointer should be on the L of light, which, as you can see, it is. At that point, if we feed it with 87 megahertz FM, we should be able to get a signal. So we want 87 meg. I'm going to take the level down a bit, so like minus 50. And FM 75 kilohertz. So I turn the output on. I've got 87 megahertz going into it, and I've got a signal there at the end, and it's just about on the peak. Let's turn that annoying sound down. Then what they tell you to do is set it to 105 megahertz on the generator. So we do that, and then we wind the thing all the way up to the other end of the scale, which isn't marked. You'll notice how the spacings get much bigger here. So 2 megahertz there, 2 megahertz there, and 1 megahertz supposedly all the way up here between 104 and 105. So it's quite non-linear really when you get up there. Do we have a signal? You sort of. You then adjust the oscillator trimmer capacitor to get that right. So that should give you a range. It then tells you to go to 90. So if we go to 90, again 90 isn't really marked on the scale, but I think we can assume it's a little way between 88 and 94, so halfway between. In fact, I'll tell you what it would be. A good way to work that out is the light program is 88 to 91 FM. Let's say the light program. We don't have the light program anymore, do we? BBC Radio 2, as it's nowadays called, is 88 to 91 FM. So the top end of that will be about 91. So I think that is right on 90, and then you fiddle with the other little coil and move the turns on that. I had to move them out quite a bit to get these things to work really. And then you go up to 104, and at 104 it should be on the scale mark. Now it isn't. That's on 104 megahertz, but it's down here, and try as I might, I can't, with any of the adjustments, it doesn't work. You can't really get it right. So that is showing as 102, probably 102 and a bit really, because it's spreading out. It should be up here where it's hitting it, and it isn't, although it's right at 105. I'm not really too worried about that, because most of the rest of the band is okay. If I set this to 100, that's pretty much on. If I set it to 96, you saw 96, which Radio Cambridgeshire was spot on. So it is out a bit at the top end, but one of the advantages of that, oddly enough, is that you can now just about get Greatest Hits Radio on 105.6, so I think I prefer it to be able to pick that up rather than have it absolutely perfect at this end. In terms of the AM side, I'm not going to use a generator for this. I can just use my knowledge of where things are really. I think we're on long wave there. That's pretty much dead on where the light program marking is. Let's go to medium wave. So 330 should be 5 live, and it is. And Talk Sport will be on 275, which is pretty close really there, I think you can see. I'm not going to do any more tweaking of that. I think that's good enough for what state the set is in and the age of it, and it's pretty much done.
The John Leach Soul Show.
4 hours of the very best soul and disco music. Sunday afternoon from 2 p.m.
On BBC Radio Cambridgeshire and BBC Sounds.
So there we have it, the Regentone TR 019, which we have partly wrecked, partly refurbished. One of the things I didn't mention earlier was this proud boast which is engraved on the back of the case and also on the badge here of being a 12 transistor radio. Now that's quite a lot really for what it does, and I'm not sure that's really much of a boast. I mean, isn't that just like saying I can use 20 words where 10 will do? They've put a lot more effort into the FM stage, having a separate oscillator and mixer transistor. They've got another transistor just to do the AFC and an extra IF stage, I think, for the FM side. Does this all add up to a better radio? I'm not sure it does. I don't think the sensitivity of it is very good. The sound isn't brilliant. I do like the styling. I know brown's not everybody's favourite colour, of course, but there was obviously a blue option if you wanted a different brand, the Colster Brander's version. But I feel it's a radio where the whole of it is sort of less than the sum of the parts, really. I've seen simpler circuitry in radios that have given better performance than this. Some might say I'm being a bit negative about it because I haven't done a particularly brilliant job this time and have made a few mistakes along the way. I don't hide it when that happens, it's not worth it. I'm not about pretending everything is perfect and goes right every time. Sometimes that doesn't make for the most interesting videos either, does it? Anyway, there we go, there's the Regentone, the first and possibly the last that we'll ever have on this channel, and I'll see you on the next one.